The envelope wasn't sealed. That was the first thing I noticed. She didn't even bother licking it shut. Just slid it across the white linen tablecloth with that smug, half-smile she always gave when she wanted to look graceful while twisting the knife. Applause still echoed from the atrium behind us. The dean was giving out honorary plaques. Someone was popping champagne near the buffet. And I was sitting across from a woman who had just spent 7 years getting a doctorate in the psychology of human behavior. Apparently, so she could manipulate me with precision. "You should be proud of me," she said sweetly, nudging the folder toward me with 2 fingers, like she was offering a dessert menu. I waited until after the photos. Inside, 6 neatly printed divorce forms. Already signed. Already dated. I blinked. Not once. Not twice. I didn't have the luxury. If I blinked too long, I might have cried, and she didn't deserve that show. "Fiona," I said, barely louder than the clinking of her wine glass, "is this the joke?" Her laughter could have sliced glass. "Wendell," she sighed, like I was an elderly dog that had forgotten the trick. "I've outgrown us." No one at the table batted an eye. Of course not. They were all hers, classmates, thesis advisors, shiny new postdocs with glossy teeth and zero sweat equity in her life. I was the outsider, the accessory, the +1 who brought nothing but loyalty and a small paycheck, the guy who bought the damn flowers for the centerpieces. I signed every page, right there, with her department head's pen, not because I agreed, not because I accepted it, but because something in me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft internal click, like a light going out in a room no one uses anymore. I stood up. No words, no scene, no drama. Just me, walking out of that high-rise reception hall, past people clinking glasses and hugging in rented gowns, past the valet who didn't recognize me, past the Uber I never ordered. 3 hours later, I crossed the state line. 3 days later, I wiped my old life clean. 3 years later, she found me through some university registry and sent a message I never expected. "Please, I need to explain. It wasn't what it looked like." Too bad she'd waited until after it was exactly what it looked like. And by then, I wasn't just her ex-husband anymore. I was the ghost she couldn't outrun. The message came through a contact form I hadn't checked in years. It was buried beneath spam from online printing shops and 2-year-old newsletters from some gardening blog I must have subscribed to by accident. But there it was, sandwiched between "get 20% off your next brochure order" and "your trial has expired." "Wendell, if this reaches you, please, just give me 10 minutes. I deserve to be heard." No name, no subject line, no punctuation, even. But the tone, oh, I recognized it instantly. That mixture of control and desperation, that was her signature. "Fiona." I didn't answer. Not at first. I stared at the screen like it might explode. And in a way, it did. That message cracked open a door I had nailed shut 3 years ago, one plank at a time, with resentment as my hammer and silence as my nails. The timing was no coincidence either. A quick search. Yes, I still knew how to search her name. You don't unlearn a habit like that. Revealed that she had just published a book. A memoir, of course, with a self-congratulatory title like Unburdened, A Journey from Silence to Strength. I wanted to throw my coffee mug through the wall when I read the description. The blurb mentioned a toxic relationship and the courage to choose oneself. There was even a quote, clearly about me, about men who grow roots instead of wings. That was her poetic way of saying I didn't rise with her. I only held her down. But if she thought I was going to fuel her redemption arc with one last vulnerable conversation, she had no idea who I'd become. Still, I replied. I didn't plan to. My finger hovered over delete for a good 5 minutes. But then I typed 6 words. 10 minutes. After that, I vanish again. She responded within the hour. We met on a video call. She looked different. Older. Sharper. Like success had sanded down the softness I remembered. But she was still beautiful. In that cold, polished way a marble statue is beautiful. Impressive. Untouchable. She smiled, like this was some bittersweet movie reunion. I didn't smile back. She said, "I know I hurt you." I cut her off. "No, you didn't hurt me. You ended me. There's a difference." She blinked fast, and for a second, I thought she might cry. But Fiona doesn't cry unless there's an audience that matters. And clearly, I didn't. I was confused, she continued. I was under pressure. My advisor. "Collier," I said. "You can say his name." She flinched. Bingo. I'm not with him anymore, she said quickly, as if that might soften the blow. That ended after. Well, shortly after you left. So, I said, arms folded, you dumped the guy you left me for, and now you want to what? Apologize? Clean your conscience? Write a follow-up book? Her eyes darted, and that's when I saw it, the part she didn't want to say. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here because something had gone wrong. Really wrong. Fiona had built her entire brand around her academic success and her personal freedom. But something had cracked beneath it all, and whatever it was, it brought her crawling back to the man she once called a footnote. You blocked me on everything, she whispered, her voice cracking for real this time. Emails, phone, LinkedIn. I even tried reaching your sister. You humiliated me in front of your entire graduating class, I said flatly. You called me a burden while holding a diploma I paid for. You made me the joke at your own party. She nodded, slowly, carefully, like any wrong move might detonate the fragile truce we stood on. I deserved your silence, she said. But I need you to understand, I didn't expect you to disappear. Not completely, not without a word. That's what got to her. Not the betrayal, not the consequences. The fact that I stopped playing my role. Fiona always thought I'd orbit her. That no matter how far she flew, I'd be down below, cheering, clapping, waiting. But I had done the unthinkable. I vanished. And worse, I never looked back. Why now? I asked. What changed? Her answer made my blood run cold. I think someone's been looking for you. Not just me. Someone official. She said it like it was nothing. Like it was a passing detail. But I knew Fiona. She never mentioned anything that wasn't loaded with landmines. I narrowed my eyes. Who exactly is someone? She hesitated. Then she leaned forward and said the last thing I ever expected. They think you're hiding something. They think you're hiding something. I sat completely still. You know that feeling when your brain tries to sprint while your body is frozen in place? That's where I was. Mouth dry. Every part of me screaming, don't react. She wants a reaction. What do you mean? I asked carefully, my voice so low I barely recognized it. Fiona leaned in like we were co-conspirators, not two people who hadn't spoken in 3 years. I got a call from a guy asking questions about you. Said he was with the Department of Academic Ethics or something like that. Claimed he was doing a verification sweep on doctoral funding connections. Your name came up. My name came up? I echoed, already bracing for whatever twist she was about to slap me with. She nodded. He asked about the financial trail. Grants. Living stipends. He wanted to know how I funded my research housing during the last 2 years of my PhD. My stomach sank. I remembered those years too well. She was in one of those ultra-expensive research apartments, the kind designed like modern hotel suites, soundproof, biometric locks, blackout curtains. I paid for it. All of it. In cash, through freelance tech gigs, and a contract job under someone else's LLC. Back then, she said she needed discretion for her field work. I never asked questions. I just wired the money. Now it was coming back. She kept going. I told them it was from you, but they didn't seem satisfied. They asked where you were now. If I had proof of where the money came from. If I had documentation. That was the problem. There was no documentation. Everything we did was off-book, because that's how she insisted it had to be. She didn't want her department tracking our finances. She wanted to look fully self-funded. Independence, she called it. Optics, I later realized. I wanted to scream. Not because of what she was telling me, but because of how calm she was being about it. Like she wasn't the one who created this mess. Like she didn't toss me aside the moment I stopped being useful. You buried me, I said. You threw me to the wolves, Fiona. And now you want me to drag myself back into the light, just so your academic reputation doesn't crack? She didn't deny it, just lowered her voice and said, they're digging deeper than I expected. That's why I had to find you. I pushed away from my desk and stood up, pacing. Part of me wanted to just hang up, block her again, disappear harder. But the other part, the weaker, dumber part, needed answers. Because something wasn't adding up. She could have let it go, could have denied everything, played dumb, and kept me buried. But instead, she was here warning me. Why are you really here? I asked. Is this about your book? Is this damage control? That's when her face changed. Her confidence cracked, just a little, like a single spider vein running across glass. She looked behind her shoulder, checked something off camera, then leaned in again, And this time her voice dropped into something I hadn't heard since the early years, actual fear. They're not just asking about the money, Wendell. They're asking about you. Your name, your work history, even your driver's license. I froze. Because that last part, the license, was a problem. I hadn't updated it since I vanished. The state it was issued in? I didn't live there anymore. The address? Long gone. The job it was tied to? Doesn't exist. Someone must have run a background request, I muttered. But why now? It's been 3 years. Fiona shook her head slowly. I don't know, but it feels targeted, like they're trying to catch something specific. There was a silence between us. Thick, heavy, the kind you can't talk through because it feels like the room itself is holding its breath. And then she said something that made my spine lock. They asked me if you ever falsified documents. That's when I knew this wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. But here's the kicker. I never faked anything. She did. She had used me as a funding front, quietly moved money through accounts tied to my name, and likely claimed hardship waivers based on my income status. If investigators were sniffing around now, it wasn't because I disappeared. It was because someone was tracing her success. And somewhere along the way, I had become the proof she needed, or the fall guy she could blame. I need you to say something on record, Fiona said softly. That the housing money was a personal gift. Just that one sentence. My blood boiled. After everything, the betrayal, the public humiliation, the total erasure, she wanted my signature again. This time not on divorce papers, but on an alibi. And she still didn't get it. I wasn't the same man she walked all over. I had my own reasons for vanishing. And if she thought that was the secret I'd been keeping, she had no idea what else I buried when I left. When someone betrays you like Fiona did, your first instinct is to burn every bridge and salt the ashes. But I didn't. Not completely. Somewhere in the scorched mess she left behind, I'd saved something. Not for revenge. Not for leverage. Just out of sheer, pathetic habit. Back when she moved into that overpriced research apartment, I started documenting everything. Rent receipts. Wire confirmations. Screenshots of bank transfers. Notes on a dusty old hard drive with timestamps, addresses, the names of the property manager, even the Wi-Fi contract. I used to call it Wendell's folder of domestic duties. Kind of a joke to myself. I thought someday it might help us apply for a loan, or buy a house, or look back on the struggle years and laugh. Instead, it became a quiet vault of everything she'd tried to erase. So when she leaned over that webcam, eyes gleaming with well-rehearsed innocence, asking me to say on record that it was all personal gifts, something inside me finally clicked. This wasn't about ethics. This was about survival. And Fiona was playing chess again, with me as the piece. You should have thought about this before you made me disappear, I said calmly. I didn't make you disappear, she snapped, suddenly defensive. You ghosted me. You made yourself impossible to find. You served me divorce papers during your graduation speech. I was trying to end it cleanly. I laughed. An actual laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I'd finally caught it, the way she phrased it. End it cleanly. Like I was a stain. Something to scrub away, professionally and efficiently. I leaned in. You didn't expect me to leave the state. That's what's bothering you. You thought I'd sulk for a few months, maybe crash on my sister's couch, then come crawling back. You wanted the upper hand. You never imagined I'd vanish completely. And now, you're realizing you might need the one man you built your career pretending didn't exist. She didn't argue, didn't deny. Her silence was louder than any protest. But it got worse. That night, after the call, I went digging. I hadn't opened the old laptop in nearly 3 years. It still had tape over the webcam and a keyboard with sticky keys from when Fiona spilled coffee during a late-night grant proposal marathon. I booted it up, half expecting it not to work. It did. Buried in a folder named archive_now was everything. PDFs, scans, even a voice recording I'd completely forgotten about. Fiona on the phone with the building manager, saying explicitly that the rent would be wired monthly from her husband's freelance earnings to keep things off the books. I sat back in my chair, my pulse ticking in my ears. She had committed academic fraud. Maybe unknowingly. Maybe not. But either way, she'd used me to make her look financially independent when she wasn't. And now that someone was pulling at that thread, she wanted me to patch the hole. But I wasn't going to be her bandage. I was going to be the tear that made the whole thing unravel. The next day, I sent a single email. Not to her. Not to the university. But to the investigator, yes, I found him. With a little digging and a few guesses based on what she said, I located the department inquiry request that had been filed. It took less than 30 minutes. Turns out Fiona never deleted her old resume site, and it linked directly to her CV, where the name Ethics Liaison, Dr. Timothy Wallace, was proudly mentioned under special oversight for funding review. I didn't send him accusations. I didn't threaten. I just sent a polite message. I understand there may be some confusion regarding my financial support of Dr. Fiona Rourke during her final years of study. I'd be happy to clarify what I contributed with documentation. That's all it took. Within 2 hours, he replied. His message was short. Too short. Mr. Kepler, thank you. We've been waiting to hear from you. Please keep all records secure. I'll be in touch soon. TW. Waiting to hear from me. That's when I realized this wasn't just some random audit. They'd been trying to find me. And suddenly, Fiona's little panic session made a lot more sense. She wasn't just scared of exposure. She was scared because I wasn't the only one with something to lose anymore. It wasn't about Fiona. That was the first thing Dr. Wallace told me when we finally spoke. The call came 2 days after I sent him that email. No warning. Just a blocked number and a quiet voice on the other end saying, Mr. Kepler, thank you for getting in touch. We've been hoping you would. I was standing in the parking lot of a truck stop in southern Idaho. It was drizzling. I hadn't shaved in 3 days, and the world still smelled like diesel and coffee. I assume you're referring to Fiona Rourke's case? I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a pause. Yes, partly. But your name surfaced in a separate matter. One that goes beyond standard funding reviews. I stopped pacing. What kind of matter? He didn't answer right away. I heard him close a file, maybe shift in his chair. Then he said something that turned my stomach inside out. Do you recall the name Ezra B. Alcott? The world went quiet. Like actually quiet. Not metaphorically. Not for dramatic effect. I mean, everything around me. The trucks, the rain, even the music blaring from someone's radio. Felt like it collapsed inward for a split second. Ezra. I hadn't heard that name since 2017. I hadn't thought about it in years. And I had gone out of my way to make sure it stayed that way. I fumbled. Yeah. I mean, barely. Why? What's this got to do with him? Another pause. Then the investigator said, we're looking into a series of funding irregularities tied to a nonprofit research accelerator he started in partnership with a few postdoctoral candidates, including your ex-wife. We believe several identities were used to shuttle funds between departments, and at least one of those names was yours. I was shaking now. Not out of fear. Not exactly. More like that strange, surreal panic that sets in when the past rears up and slaps you across the face with something you thought you'd buried. Ezra wasn't just anyone. He was the guy who got me my first off-the-books freelance contract. He was the reason I could afford Fiona's rent. We weren't close, but we shared enough sleepless nights in caffeine-drenched co-working spaces to trust each other's wiring diagrams. He always wore black turtlenecks, always smelled like cinnamon gum, and had an annoying habit of quoting philosophers I never asked to hear about. But here's the thing. Ezra died. At least, I thought he did. Back in 2018, I got an email from a mutual friend, a vague, 2-line message saying Ezra had been found dead in his apartment. No foul play suspected, it read. Natural causes. And now here was a federal academic ethics liaison suggesting Ezra was tied to a phantom funding ring using my name? Do you have proof I was involved? I asked slowly, my mouth dry. We have logs, Wallace replied. We have authorizations from someone using your credentials. That's why we reached out to Dr. Rourke. But her answers were, let's say, evasive. She claimed she couldn't locate you. Said she hadn't spoken to you since her graduation. I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. She only talks to me when the ground starts shaking beneath her heels. There was a long pause. Then, carefully, Dr. Wallace said, Mr. Kepler, are you certain you never signed off on financial documents involving Ezra Alcott's grant network? I'm not even sure what the hell his grant network is, I snapped. And no, I haven't signed anything in connection to Ezra since. I don't know, before Fiona defended her dissertation. Then we may have a problem, he said. I exhaled hard through my nose, already feeling my headache crawl in like a cold fog. Yeah? And what kind of problem are we talking about? He hesitated. An identity-level problem. Whoever used your name didn't just authorize funds. They established multiple layered accounts using your employment data, some of which no longer exist, or never existed at all. I went quiet. Then I said the one thing I never thought I'd have to say again. You think I'm the ghost? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, when was the last time you renewed your license, filed taxes, or appeared in a public-facing database under your legal name? And there it was. I had disappeared so completely, so efficiently, that now it wasn't just Fiona who wanted me back in the system. Someone had used my vanishing act to build something under my name. And if I came back into the light now, I might find out it wasn't just a matter of fraud. It might be a matter of who was still alive and who had never left. When you've spent years running from your past, the last thing you ever expect is for it to start running toward you. But that's exactly what happened after my call with Dr. Wallace. For 2 nights straight, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see Fiona's face on that video call, her cool composure, her calculated tremble, and that flicker of something behind her eyes she hadn't shown me since before the wedding. Fear. Not guilt. Not manipulation. Actual fear. It haunted me. Because Fiona didn't get scared unless something much bigger than her ego was at stake. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, dig. I started by pulling everything I had from my old archives. The hard drive, the notes, the bank records. But this time, instead of looking at Fiona's lies, I looked for Ezra's shadow. And it didn't take long to find one. The payment records from 2018, the ones I thought were simply transfers for Fiona's rent, didn't go directly to her account. Not all of them, anyway. Some went through a holding company called Arcus Behavioral Systems, registered in Illinois. I'd never heard of it. So I searched. And that's when it got weird. Arcus Behavioral Systems had been dissolved in 2020, but before that, its director of record was listed as Ezra B. Alcott, 3 months after the date he supposedly died. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe some bureaucratic delay. But the address listed under the company wasn't an office or a university department. It was a storage facility outside Omaha. The kind with corrugated steel doors, faded blue paint, and security cameras that probably hadn't worked since 2009. I knew I shouldn't go there. Every cell in my body told me not to. But curiosity has always been my curse. The same one that made me read Fiona's journals when she started drifting away. The same one that made me check her research folders at night, wondering what I'd done wrong. Curiosity had burned me before. Yet here I was, gassing up my car and heading toward Nebraska like some washed-up detective with a coffee addiction and a grudge. The facility was empty when I arrived. A lonely patch of concrete, rows of rusted units, and a single flickering light above the office door. I half expected no one to be there, but an older man in a green vest looked up from a crossword when I walked in. He didn't even ask for my ID. Just pointed to a clipboard and said, Unit 47, paid through next year. He slid me the keys without a glance. That's when I realized whoever was paying for the storage unit was still active. Unit 47 was halfway down the row. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might echo off the steel walls. When I turned the lock and lifted the door, the first thing I saw was dust, and the second was a stack of boxes labeled Project Root. There were at least 15 of them. Some old lab equipment. A broken monitor, folders filled with papers stamped confidential, and near the back, something that made my knees go weak, a binder with my name on the cover. Wendell Kepler, Data Compensation Account. It wasn't mine. The handwriting wasn't mine, but the signature at the bottom of every page was. Or, rather, a perfect copy of it. Each form described payment authorizations, funding transfers, and approvals tied to a remote consultant supposedly working under Arcus Behavioral Systems. It listed an hourly rate, the exact one I used when freelancing back then. Even the fake invoices matched my writing style. Whoever did this had studied me down to the punctuation. I sat on the cold floor, flipping through the binder page by page. And then I froze on one sheet near the end, because attached to it was a photo. A recent one. It was Fiona, standing beside Ezra. The timestamp said, August 2022. I felt my lungs twist. It couldn't be. Ezra had been dead for 5 years. I'd seen the obituary. I'd even sent a condolence message. But there he was, alive, smiling, his arm around my ex-wife, both of them standing in front of a university banner that read, Neural Advancement Conference. That's when I noticed something else. A reflection in the background glass. A third person. The outline of someone holding a camera. The figure's posture was familiar, too familiar. It looked exactly like me. I slammed the binder shut and stumbled backward. My pulse roared in my ears. The lights overhead flickered once, twice, then steadied. The air felt heavy, like the walls themselves were closing in. I didn't know what was real anymore. Had Ezra faked his death? Was Fiona part of it? Or was someone using both our names to build something darker? Something that needed me to stay buried while they wore my life like a borrowed coat? As I locked the unit and hurried out into the cold, my phone buzzed. A new message. No number. Just a single line of text. You weren't supposed to find that, Wendell. My mouth went dry. I hadn't told a single soul I was there. Not Fiona. Not Wallace. No one. Which meant whoever sent that message already knew exactly where I was. It took me 10 minutes to convince myself I wasn't hallucinating. The message was real. I checked it over and over, hoping maybe it was a glitch, maybe I had a virus, maybe my phone had auto-filled a draft I never sent. But no, it was real. A simple line of text from a number that wasn't in my contacts anymore, because I had deleted it 5 years ago, right after the funeral. The number had belonged to Ezra. At least it used to. You weren't supposed to find that, Wendell. No punctuation, just like his old texts. Always straight to the point, like periods were a waste of time. I stared at it so long the screen dimmed. And when I unlocked it again, the message had disappeared. Gone. Vanished. No history. No trace. Like it never existed. I should have turned around. Should have driven straight to a police station or a lawyer or a damn bunker in the woods. But I didn't. Because by now, it wasn't about staying safe. It was about knowing. And knowing what? I wasn't even sure anymore. All I knew was this. Someone had stolen my name. Someone had faked Ezra's death. And Fiona, the woman who once told me I lacked ambition, was somehow standing in the middle of it all like a polished statue on a cracked foundation. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed holed up in a cheap motel with 2 locks on the door, the curtains drawn, and my laptop running offline. I opened every document I'd saved, every voice note, every backup file. I wasn't searching for names anymore. I was searching for patterns. Something, anything, that would link Fiona, Ezra, and the shadow version of me they'd built. At 3:44 a.m., I found it. A photo from Fiona's old lab blog, one I'd saved back when I used to help her proofread posts before publication. It was labeled Team Retreat, 2018. And there, in the back row, was Ezra. But the photo had been posted 2 months after his death certificate was issued. I zoomed in. His face was partially obscured by a raised champagne glass, but the timestamp embedded in the image metadata didn't lie. Alive. Documented. After death. Then came the real gut punch. To the left of Ezra, partially cropped out, was a man I didn't recognize. Except, I did. Not by name, but by face. Because it was my face. Same eyes. Same posture. Same hairstyle I'd had in 2017, before I left everything behind. The man in the photo wasn't me. But he looked enough like me to fool someone who didn't know better. And suddenly, it all made sense. They hadn't just used my name. They'd used my identity. Or rather, manufactured a new version of me. One who existed just enough to validate their funding schemes, but not enough to draw attention. A Wendell who wrote academic reports I never touched. Who signed grants I never saw. Who authorized spending that I was now being quietly investigated for. But why now? Why come back after 3 years of silence? That's when it hit me. Ezra's storage unit lease was about to expire. They thought it would just rot in some forgotten bin. That no one would notice the records. That I was gone for good. But when I showed up, I messed up their timeline. They weren't worried I'd go public. They were worried I'd figure it out too soon. And then came the final blow. One that didn't come from Fiona, or Ezra, or Wallace. It came from my bank. An old account, one I hadn't touched since the week I vanished, suddenly sent me a fraud alert. Unusual wire activity in my name. Several high-value transfers attempted. Blocked. Flagged. Under review. I called. I demanded details. The rep said the account had been dormant for years, but the login attempt had come from a university IP address in Massachusetts. A flagged terminal with previous access history matching a known administrator. They wouldn't give me the name, of course. But I already knew who it was. Fiona. Not only had she lured me out with her crocodile tear apology, but she, or someone working with her, had tried to access my old accounts. Probably to erase or reroute anything that could be traced. probably assuming I wouldn't notice until it was too late. They were cleaning up, and I was the mess. I packed up that night, grabbed the binder, the hard drive, the printed documents, and left the motel without checking out. I drove until sunrise, until my eyes burned, until the road blurred into a gray smear of exhaustion and caffeine. And then I made a decision. I called Dr. Wallace, told him everything. The storage unit, the binder, the messages, the photos, even the strange man who looked like me. I expected him to think I was insane, paranoid, delusional. Instead, he went quiet, utterly silent. And then he asked a question I didn't see coming. Mr. Kepler, would you be willing to testify? That one word, testify, pulled the entire situation into sharp, terrifying focus. This wasn't about academia anymore. This was criminal, which meant one of two things was about to happen. Either I was going to help bring it all crashing down, or I was going to get buried with it. They flew me in under a different name. I was registered at the hotel as Caleb Irving. Room key handed over without eye contact. No questions, no courtesy basket. Just an envelope with a briefing packet and a meeting time. The Ethics Oversight Committee had booked the hearing in a secure facility, part university, part federal. Cold walls, buzzing lights. A place where truth and lies got shredded together and labeled classified. I hadn't seen Fiona in person since the day she handed me the divorce papers. But when they brought her in for questioning, I watched from behind tinted glass. She didn't look powerful anymore. Gone was the confident posture. Gone was the lipstick that matched her degrees. She looked pale, rattled, like a chess master caught in her own trap. And maybe that's exactly what happened. Dr. Wallace sat beside me, his eyes scanning a report as he muttered, "We found 5 sets of false credentials tied to your name. 2 under grant programs, 3 linked to behavioral research projects. Ezra co-signed most of them." "But Ezra's dead," I said, almost reflexively, still not fully trusting what I'd seen in those photos. Wallace gave a small shake of his head. The body in 2018, misidentified, belonged to a John Doe with a similar profile. Official cause, overdose. Ezra had vanished weeks before. He used the false death to disappear, just like you did. It made sense now. Ezra faked his own exit, then used my disappearance to create a proxy identity, a believable Wendell Kepler who lived only on paper. Fiona backed it up. They built an entire system around ghosts. One dead, one erased, one profitable. And then I reappeared. I spent 3 full days giving testimony, backed by documentation, metadata, call logs, and financial statements. Everything I had saved from my past, even the pieces I thought were useless. Turns out the most boring stuff, old receipts, outdated login screens, time-stamped folder names, became the very threads that unraveled their web. Fiona's lawyer tried to spin it, claimed she was manipulated, that Ezra had pressured her, that she didn't know the full extent. But emails don't lie, signatures don't vanish, and betrayal leaves fingerprints. When the final report came out, it was sealed under academic fraud, identity manipulation, and research grant laundering. Ezra was officially charged in absentia. No one had seen him since the photo. But now, with warrants issued and international attention, it was only a matter of time. As for Fiona, she lost her title. The university revoked her PhD. Her book deals collapsed. Speaking engagements canceled. Her agent dropped her. Within months, the name Dr. Fiona Rourke stopped appearing in academic circles altogether. A ghost, just like she wanted me to be. You might think I celebrated. I didn't. I just sat in my tiny apartment in Portland, the one I'd moved into under my real name again, and watched the sun rise for the first time without a weight on my chest. The vindication was quiet. It wasn't a parade. It was a breath. And then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was grabbing coffee at a small place near the river, trying to readjust to being a man with a real name again, when someone tapped my shoulder. She was wearing an oversized hoodie and carrying a bag of books. Wendell. I turned, and there she was. Marla. She used to be one of Fiona's classmates. Back then, I barely noticed her, quiet, kind, never joined in the after-party arrogance. She once brought us a lasagna when I was sick. I remembered that. She smiled shyly. "I saw your name in the report," she said. "I just wanted to say, I always knew something was off. I'm glad you came back." We talked for hours. First about Fiona, then about anything but books, films, her work in art therapy, my obsession with restoring old radios. Something clicked, something real, something I hadn't felt in years. She didn't ask me what happened. She asked me what I wanted to do next. And for once, I had an answer. We started slow. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch into weekends. And a few months later, we started building something I'd thought was permanently lost. Trust. Not the kind built on fixing someone, but the kind built on being seen. It wasn't a Hollywood ending, but it was mine. I got my name back. My life. My dignity. And when Fiona tried to message me one last time, a short, cryptic email with no subject and just one line. You never really knew the whole story. I didn't reply. I just hit delete. Some ghosts don't deserve to be remembered.